I started out as a stand-up who did political material, and I'd done a couple of one-woman shows that had been based on sort of the evolution of 24-hour news and media. And during the first Gulf War, it occurred to me that CNN had been spending more and more money on graphics and less money on research. And it was like, well, that's kind of a sounding alarm that I think through comedy I kind of want to do through my stand-up to talk about that. And then it became that there was things like there was always children disappearing on the news, and like we never got the big story. And so I'd been talking about these in my one-woman shows and my stand-up, and then Comedy Central knew my stand-up, and I'd done specials for them and stuff. And so then they said, would you want to come and create a show that responds to the world on a daily basis? And I said, yeah, but I said, one of my big sticking points is that it's not just the politicians and the newsmakers, it's the media itself that's as big of a player in the landscape. So if you want to do it where we actually become a media outlet and become them and show how sort of remiss they are in reporting the facts and getting it wrong, as well as taking on the powerful, I'm all for it. And they said, that's a great idea. And so Madeleine Smithberg and I created this machine that is now The Daily Show. Well, I think that there was several different, as we were developing the show, there was all sorts of different camps as we were on the air about people that wanted to focus on pop culture and people that wanted to focus on politics and what was going to be engaging. And I was sort of fighting for politics. Other people were fighting for pop culture. So we had this meld of politics and pop culture. And when Jon came on board, Jon was really, let's take on the people that are the big giant offenders and hypocrites, which are corporations and the media and politicians. So that when the show really started going for sort of really healthy big targets of big bullies, that's really when it started to shine. And Jon is somebody who really knows that game, and through humor, you know, he always says the show is funny first and then, you know, the points come through second. And so, but he really knows and understands that picking on the big targets and pointing out their hypocrisy is definitely the best way to go when it comes to political satire. Well, I think there's all the political climate. I mean, when it was being developed and it was the last years of Clinton, you know, remember that Clinton wasn't always just Monica. You know, there was welfare reform, there was all sorts of stuff that happened. Those elections were also really great. So the show built itself on that. And then when the Bush administration took off, yeah, I mean, it's sort of incredible how it felt like we hired them so we could have material. Like there really wasn't an election. We just paid off America to vote for George Bush so that we could have a show. Well, I think you're forgetting a whole part of the political landscape, which was the Bush administration. You had 10 Republican candidates. Only 3 of them believe in evolution. You had Mitt Romney. You had Mike Huckabee. You had Hillary. You had Bill Clinton running off the rails. You had this power struggle between the first viable female candidate for president and the first viable African-American candidate. And then you had John McCain on his own, being he was like Yosemite Sam. Then Sarah Palin happened. So there was a wealth of material. And also, don't forget, we had wiretapping. We had crazy, attorneys who were, political appointees from Pat Robertson University. We had Katrina. There was so much going on before the election, into the election, the candidates themselves, and John Edwards, don't forget, that, Palin didn't come till September of 2007. And so, or 2008, I'm sorry. So I have to say, Tina Fey was probably sitting in her underwear eating Cheerios on that morning when they stood on the stage in Minnesota, and I'm sure she spit whatever was out in her mouth and said, "Oh my God, the dumbest woman in the world looks just like me." Ka-ching! I just finished doing a one-woman show about Obama's first 100 days. And it's not hard at all because Obama is hope and change and he's historic, but he's a politician. He came up from the machine. He's not Gandhi. He is a centrist. He is inconsistent. I think for me, progressives lobbed on so much onto Obama. He never claimed he was a progressive. And so there's a lot of humor mined in what people expected Obama to be because they didn't ever read his books or look at how he legislated. And he has had hysterical moments. He's not an idiot like Bush. So I think you have to be smarter in your politics, which means your audience hopefully is smarter and paying more attention. But, you have a Treasury, our economy's falling apart, and there's one guy that works at the Treasury, Tim Geithner, and they can't find anyone else to fill the jobs because, all of those people have committed crimes. So there's that, there's Larry Summers, there's Obama expanding the wiretapping program. There's the closing of Gitmo. There's Dick Cheney, unavoidable for comment, espousing his bizarro belief system. There's torture memos. So there hasn't been a beat, a moment that has fallen off. We're like, oh, what are we going to talk about? It is seamlessly transitioned from Bush into Obama in just a very different way of looking at things. In general, the media is always a source. It's sort of my raison d'etre. I absorb print media, I absorb TV media. At the moment, the Morning Joe program I am completely obsessed with because I watch Joe Scarborough bully Mika Brzezinski, and it feels like she has Stockholm Syndrome. It feels like everyone on that show is so unhealthily codependent on each other that it's like watching one of those weird Ibsen family dramas play out in front of you, except with some current events in it. I think that the people who have been doing political satire, or the people I've talked to, have really felt like it used to be the media was the watchdog for those, the government and corporate America. And when the media sort of felt like it was in bed and they were lazy or in bed with their, advertisers, I think comics naturally started filling the role of sort of being the watchdog of the watchdog. Political satire and comedy, we just started asking the questions that journalists weren't asking anymore, through humor, through sort of hopefully funny, righteous anger, but also just asking questions that our audience wanted to hear. And so we were doing basically a service. We just kept doing what we were doing, but then it just transitioned into like, find out what's going on, or if we're just going to be lied to from right, left, and center, to provide a haven where at least people can come together and not feel crazy. Feel like, hey, I'm in a group of people who understand that everybody's spinning us and somebody's on stage pointing that out through humor. At least I can breathe a sigh that I'm not insane when I hear the cacophony of lies. I think comedy can be a tool for social activism. I think that when you point out hypocrisy, again, because the media often doesn't, the follow-up question should just be put in the Smithsonian as a relic of media, because there are no follow-ups anymore. People don't have enough historical knowledge to say, wait, you're lying. People don't have enough, knowledge on the environment to say, wait, scientists say there's global warming, it's real. So a lot of information just sort of floats out there like a thick, muggy day, and nobody weeds through it and cuts through the muck and says, here's the truth. And I think that pointing that out through humor can be a tool to have people say, wow, I should be asking questions, and I'm laughing. And I think that's what's fun, is that you can ask questions yourself on stage through humor, and then that means the audience kind of scratches its head and says, you're right. And as you watch videos on the web and The Daily Show and Colbert, Bill Maher, you will see them lay out a case and make it funny through video, through things that are out there. Somebody says one thing one day and something else the next day. And, we have this amazing medium with which we can put it out there. Rachel Maddow, Ed Schultz, and Keith Olbermann, there's this trifecta on MSNBC that is trying to get to the bottom of the story and look between the lines of the story. And, I did a radio show with Rachel Maddow for a year. And together, it was sort of like I was the color commentator and she was the person that was bringing all of these stories that were buried in independent media or that were not covered at all. And we would get experts and she would drill it home. And then I would sort of provide the humor and outrage of the listener. I was learning it for the first time along with Rachel. And it was really helpful. I mean, I guess, and I hope that they continue to do that. My fear is that if news shows, keep reading the chatter about how most kids get their news from The Daily Show, which I don't believe is true. I think young people get their news and then they go to The Daily Show for response, because you wouldn't like The Daily Show if you didn't know what was going on in the news. So it's kind of a false premise. But I hope they don't start feeling like because The Daily Show is a successful place for people to go and sort of have a catharsis, that they become that. I hope they still become interesting, compelling, and using humor, certainly, voices of reason and not comedians. I would say Jon Stewart probably does have more influence, because you can count on one hand the number of actual broadcast journalists are on television. Let's not call them broadcast journalists when 80% of them are commentators. How many broadcast journalists are on Fox? How many broadcast journalists who went to journalism school, were investigative reporters, worked at newspapers, have Pulitzers or Peabodys for digging into a story and making it great? There is very, very few. So if you're going to have a landscape of people commentating, Jon Stewart actually culls the materials and looks at things and presents it in a funny way, but nonetheless, there's truth there. He's not making up news to make a joke. He's taking the reality of the news and spinning the hypocrisy in it and using humor doing it. So yeah, that person is going to definitely be more influential, I think, than somebody who's just some ex-congressman who's literally wondering aloud on television, bloviating their opinions that are based on newspaper things that you've read, I've read. I mean, that's what's crazy, is that they say things, I learn nothing because I already read that. In fact, you watch news shows and they read you the paper. It's like, really, is this what broadcast news has come to, is they read the paper and then tell you what's in the paper? And so if newspapers are crumbling, what will become of broadcast news? It's a very interesting dilemma that I think they're going to find themselves in. I like to call them the fright wing. And, when you scare people and you indulge their fears, that's an easy emotion to live with. You're validated in your fear of race, your fear of terrorists, your fear of anything. It almost is like what Glenn Beck does, which I think is the most frightening thing, is that he is basically telling his viewers that they have no control and that they should be afraid. And that is this really scary false premise, because if you're a human being and you feel like everything is happening to you, you want someone to take care of you. And that was one thing I was fascinated with the Bush administration, was if you look at the history of what George Bush told America, it was, look, I'm going to take care of everything. You can stay on the couch and you can just be against abortion and hate the gays and hate stem cell research. And before this war, I'm not going to ask you to fight. And so you can have a set of values that allows you to still sit in your recliner and be judgmental. Whereas it's actually more interesting as you watch the elevation of lefty blogs and progressive pundits. They're asking you to participate. And when people start participating, what they find out is they're part of a community. They want to help other people. They see that if they actually get off the couch and start reading and listening and taking a stand and getting into their neighborhoods, they can actually accomplish something in a neighborhood scale, and they see how that transforms incredibly. And using the internet as a tool has been just an unbelievable boon for the proactive. Well, sometimes I feel a little bit with YouTube. It's like, when you go to a discount store like Marshall's or TJ Maxx, and you know that there's one Prada suit in all of those racks of crap, it's how dedicated are you to weeding through the bull to actually find the one or two amazing items that are there. And I think that while YouTube has become certainly a place where you can find amazing pieces of satire and comedy, I think that really good stuff gets lost there, because you'll see that there are places like Barely Political and Huffington Post where, if you know there's a destination on the web now for satire, you'll go there rather than trying to scour through you. I mean, if I were to Google, political satire, or like YouTube, a search of satirical videos, holy moly, it's providing a place for a lot of people to put them up. It's not really helping weed out which ones are sort of making a point, which ones are just funny, and stuff like that. It gives people an outlet to do stuff, which I like. I think the one thing that I find incredibly awesome about the internet is that it kind of weeds out the complainers, because now you have a tool and a device with which you can learn to shoot and learn to edit and write material and start your own web page and put your stuff up and send it out to the world. And if you want to really dig around, you can find websites who you can contact and say, hey, I'm doing these videos that I think would be right for your site. So it's really getting the activists who are thinking about getting their message out. It gives them an opportunity, because for years we, as filmmakers and writers and producers and actors, had to wait for some network or some casting director to give us a forum. And now we don't have to do that anymore. So if people are still complaining, then they're not really utilizing all that's available to them. Are you Christopher Hitchens? Of course not. Of course men aren't funnier than women. I don't even understand really. Funny, here's the deal about funny. I just had a huge fight on my Facebook page with a guy who said, "You're not funny, Lizz Winstead." And I was like, "Well, you're not funny either." And then I realized that I went to his little Facebook page and I saw that he was a comic that goes on the road. And funny is subjective. Funny is like, sushi. Do you like sushi or do you not like sushi? And then what kinds of sushi do you like? If someone's making a living doing comedy, then people think they're funny. I might not find them funny, but others do. So for anyone to make any broad statement about what's funny, what isn't funny, people who say there's lines that you can cross in comedy are people who are destroying the creative process. There's never a line in comedy. You never know what a line is, because someone may cross it consistently for the way one person looks at humor, and that same routine may never cross a line. So I just, boundaries and what's funny, I just feel like it's all so subjective that I always say, if you don't think I'm funny, please tell your like-minded friends that I'm not funny, because then I don't have to worry about them coming to my show feeling like they wasted their money and they hated it, And if you do think I'm funny, then please tell people, because then everyone can have a good time. Well, I think for Christopher Hitchens, it's that it just feels so weirdly, it's weird. I did a panel with him this summer, and he couldn't have been more cordial to me after he'd written that thing, and they were going to bring it up and talk about it, and they never did, and I was more than willing to do that. I think it comes from an ignorance that if you aren't open to allowing someone to make you laugh, If you've never seen a woman be funny, then you're just a sexist asshole. Like, it's crazy. If one woman has made you laugh ever in the history of your life, that means women are funny. Like, and so I don't know where it comes from. It comes from, if you say that, then you hate women. I think that then you are not open to hearing what women have to say, and you're probably not funny, and you're probably threatened by women who can command attention in a room, work it, make people laugh because you can't. I mean, that's the only explanation I can think of, is that you just hate women. No, I think there's bad dirty jokes and there's good dirty jokes. And if you execute a dirty joke poorly, it's cringeworthy. If it's funny, it's funny. I think that Sarah Silverman and various other women, Wanda Sykes, who I think is great, Roseanne, who has some really good blue material. I do some dirty jokes, and I've never had a problem. Those women don't have problems. It's all in the execution.